Part 39. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 381. If Gretel knew that the drowning technique of the Inquisition was suspected to be used to wash the lungs, he would definitely think of a way immediately and find a great magician of the conjuration system to hold his thigh. This spell is great. This spell is great. Can you teach me? With this spell, there is no need to pour water into the lungs bit by bit. You can fill one lung lobe, and then insert a tube for direct negative pressure drainage. If Gretel knew that the priests of the Lord of Glory directly used drowning technique to wash their lungs, he would definitely be shocked. Warrior. Warrior. No prior examination, no anesthesia, no blood oxygen monitoring, dare to start directly. Do you know what the indications are? Do you know what the contraindications are? Did you know that lavage cannot be performed if there are lung bullae with a diameter greater than 2 cm under the pleura? Did you know that surgery cannot be performed if you have active pulmonary tuberculosis? But Greet knew nothing. Therefore, he also lost the opportunity to have a hard fight with the Lord of Glory Church to prevent the tragedy from happening. At this moment, he was wandering along the mountain path with the rest of Rosga's team. In other words, Greet stood on the mountain road with his arms folded, watching the Rothaga team fully prepared and trying various ways to tame the goat. Bernard. Choose a good one for me. It's not like he was standing alone. During the King Selection War, the garrison work of the Dwarf Kingdom was greatly strengthened. From the royal court to the surrounding areas of the Holy Mountain, knights patrolled continuously. As soon as they saw the team disperse to tame the goat, a nearby dwarf guard immediately came over and formed a circle around Gretel. Just kidding, this is a miracle doctor. A miracle doctor who can cut open a person's chest, cut their heart out, revive the dead, and pour water into their lungs to clean them. It doesn't matter if others bump into each other, even if it's Prince Rosga, everyone doesn't need to be so nervous. He is also a strong warrior anyway and can take care of himself. However, the little miracle doctor must take good care of him. Don't surround him and protect him, just in case a wolf jumps out next to him. Or a snow leopard. This season, the snow leopards are coming down the mountain to hunt sheep. Greet watched peacefully from the guard. The surrounding copper and iron walls were a little lower than him and did not block his sight. Far below the hillside, Prince Rosga and a group of people spread out and lay down, wearing a ring of branches on their heads, covered with leaves, and with colorful paint on their faces, holding up the flower branches sway far away. The horizontal shaking means lying down and not moving, the vertical shaking means getting closer, and suddenly throwing away the flower branches. Everyone rushes. In summer, the Herman Mountains are covered with green grass. The green grass beside the mountain streams and irrigated by streams and lakes is especially beautiful. Even the argali, which had been moving around on the high rocks, were lured down the mountain, where they grazed freely on the grass beside the stream and occasionally drank water. Gretel counted about 14 or 5 sheep in this flock. In addition to the lambs of that year, there were also about 10 adult argali sheep. One with a particularly huge curved horn stood on the stone, constantly looking around, as if to warn the group. There are 7 people in the team. They took away 6 sheep. How many can be left to take care of the ewes and lambs? Not bad. The first sheep is good. If you catch the leader, you can take away the whole group. It's best to bring less. There are many lambs in this group and they need to be protected by rams. If you come early, you can catch a few more groups. It's better to catch them in a group. If there are too many leaders, it will be easier to fight. The dwarf warriors around Gretel were talking a lot. The squad leader suddenly turned his head. Little miracle doctor, which god are you the priest of? God of nature. The god of nature? The servants of the god of nature, just go down and take the sheep away. Don't talk nonsense. The little miracle doctor will end up being such a bully. Of course we have to tame the mount ourselves. Gretel silently looked at the sky, thankful that he was tall enough that as long as he raised his head, others could not see his face. To be honest, the priest of the god of nature taming the mount, that can't be called catching at all. Gretel had personally seen Elder Erwin catching wild sheep. He walked off the road and walked directly into the field, close to the center of the sheep, and touched left and right, and then the sheep followed directly. Scattered away? Explode the group? Resist? Are you kidding me? Elder Erwin once told him that not to mention herbivores, they are ferocious beasts. Even the priests of the god of nature can touch and hold them whenever they want. If they want to see if the beast's teeth are decayed, they can just open their mouths. The look in his eyes when he spoke made it difficult to describe, and it was like a piece of rotten wood that cannot be carved. Gretel. Can you blame me? I am a clinician, not a veterinarian. Even though I'm a veterinarian, that doesn't mean I'm just pointing out beast communication skills. Fortunately, the Dwarf King's court allowed him to pretend to be a miracle doctor, and no one accused him of having a crooked skill tree. Amidst the discussion of the dwarf warriors, the sheep gradually moved into the encirclement. The leading ram also jumped off the rock and took 2 steps forward. At that moment, Bernard stood up from his knees and waved the leather rope quickly with his hand. Greet saw this skill for the first time. At the end of the dark brown leather rope, there is a fist-sized stone, maybe an iron block. Centered on Bernard's right hand, he turned quickly and waved it like a whirring sound. In Greet's eyes, Piso's afterimage almost became a disc. With the sound of wind, the ram brayed and ran away. As soon as the ram ran away, the whole flock followed. Several dwarves suddenly jumped up, waving branches, yelling, and cutting in all directions. Bernard, however, knelt on the spot without moving, swung the leather rope as fast as he could, and then suddenly let go. Don't kill it, Greet couldn't help shouting. The stone was carrying a leather cord and flew towards the leading ram like a meteor. However, it did not hit the sheep, but passed directly through the middle of the sheep's legs. The end of the leather rope tripped on the leg of the lamb, and the stone was suddenly pulled back. The ram was changing direction, and the leather rope bounced back and wrapped around the lamb's leg. Then, with the leg of lamb as the center, make 1, 2, 3 turns. The leading ram whined and fell to the ground. Bernard then rushed forward, stretched out his big hand, and grabbed another ram's horns. On the other side, Prince Rothaga grabbed the horns of the sheep with both hands, turned over suddenly, and got on the back of the other ram. After taking care of the first sheep and 2 strong rams, the flock gradually became quiet. The dwarf warriors saw and touched each one, and came to Gretel with 3 rams and 3 ewes. There are just a few of them, I don't have to choose. I have to leave 2 rams behind, and I can't take the ewes with their babies. Fortunately, there are enough. Dwarf warriors are very good at taming goats. Riding on the back of the sheep, jumping and bumping, after a round of tossing, both rams were already submissive. As for the 3 ewes, they are more obedient than the rams and don't even need to be tamed. Rosga personally led a snow-white ewe to Gretel. This one has the best temper. You give it a try. If it doesn't work, we'll find another flock. Greet looked embarrassed. A dwarf can sit on a goat without a saddle and bridle, but he may not be able to sit firmly. Hey, where are the saddle, stirrups, and bridle? I clearly remember that there are some in the space bag. Boss, you sit here. Bernard dragged the leading ram up and pushed Prince Rothaga aside. Rosga pushed his thigh hard. Hey, Greet said he wants the best behaved one. As he said this, the ram lowered its head and exhaled, pawing its hooves. As soon as his head shook, Bernard said hey and pressed his arms down. The 4 legs of the first sheep suddenly weakened and he knelt down. Bernard let go of his arms again. The leader stood up slowly, and finally stood still quietly. No, it must be this, and Bernard refused to give in. This one has the biggest horns. The U has no horns, so the boss can't catch it. Prince Rosga turned his head silently. Feli, Hannah and Gavin looked up at the sky. Jin Na covered her lips and laughed out loud. Then what if it makes a fuss? There's still me. Indeed, when Bernard stood next to the sheep, even the strongest sheep's back only reached to the middle of his thighs. Let him ride a goat. If he stands upright on the back of the goat will run away. So the end result is that Gretel is riding the sheep, and Bernard is walking beside him, holding the sheep's horns and ready to use violence at any time. Several other dwarves lined up, riding the goats they selected, waving to the patrol. Goodbye. Bon voyage, the dwarves on the patrol shouted at the top of their lungs. Get off the mountain safely. We are still here waiting for you. Led by Prince Rosga, the warriors of the king's selection team all turned back on the sheep's backs, waving and saying hello. Only Greet clenched the goat's horns tightly, holding the goat's back between his legs, refusing to relax at all. Bernard looked at him helplessly. Boss, it's okay, I will pull you before you fall. But this mountain road is so steep. Greet was frightened. The place where the Argali lives is at the junction of the forest area and the rocky area. That is to say, as you go up, there are bare rocks, small clumps of shrubs, and creeping meadows everywhere. The rocks are steep and largely weathered. The goats have stepped on it, and with every step, pebbles rolled. The dwarves sat freely on the sheep's backs, even looking back and roaring songs in harmony. Bernard stepped steadily step by step, only Gretel was frozen. If he falls down, even if he has the feather falling technique to save his life, he won't be able to climb up. He sat on the back of the goat with the heart in his hand, and the light in his hand flashed, filling himself with various defensive spells. At the entrance of the royal court, Archbishop Geronai looked at the mountains in the distance, narrowed his eyes slightly, and asked in a low voice. When can our people set off? There is one more day, Your Excellency the Archbishop. There are still 2 parts of the armor that have not been completed. Trash. I gave him the digging demonic insect, but he was 1 day later than the prince and the others. By the way, you really can't do anything on the mountain. I'm afraid not. There are people from the patrol team along the way, so it's not easy to avoid people's eyes. Moreover, not everyone in the king's selection team has firm beliefs. Let them take action, and things will be easily leaked. Then, we can only activate the backup plan. Double monthly passes from today to September 30th. From today to September 30th, from 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening, the crowdfunding reward is 1,500 points, and the author can receive 4 monthly tickets. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please give me a reward. You all give rewards from 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening. Don't waste your monthly pass by leaving it at another time. Heart hurts. Thanks to at Feeling Fog for the 5,000 starting coins. Thanks to Cantham for the 2,000 starting coin reward. Thanks to Origami, Gart, Bendashu, Bookfriend 201812051045111742, Long Aotian for the 1,500 starting coins reward. Thanks to Lemon, Sun is not allowed to play with his mobile phone for the 100 starting coins reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 382. Chapter 382, Someone Fell from the Sky. 10,000 rewards plus 3 updates. Kenneth fetched a pot of water from the mountain stream, raised his head, and drank a gulp of water until he was full. He wiped his mouth, dipped the leather kettle into the mountain stream again, and sighed loudly. Unlucky place. In the middle of summer, the water can be so cold. Stop dilly-dallying. Move faster. Someone shouted from above. Kenneth agreed, plugged the lid of the kettle, and climbed up. In a hurry, he missed his footing and rolled down the hillside, half of his body submerged in the mountain stream. After finally struggling, I climbed up the ridge again. When I came up, I was stunned on the spot. The entire team, including 11 people except him, were all dead on the ground. "There's another one here!" someone shouted from behind. Kenneth turned around suddenly, and before he could see the person clearly, a flash of sword was right in front of him. For this king selection battle, the Glory Bishop Church has sent more than just Archbishop Jeroni. What the Archbishop could mobilize at any time was an action team from the Inquisition and 2 teams of soldiers pretending to be caravan guards. They did not join the mission, but acted in various capacities in or around the royal court. There is also a barbarian squad and an orc squad that can carry out missions at any time as long as the money is available. A little further away, there are still several expedition teams in the wilderness, which can be summoned in advance. Before the Archbishop came, he even knew that a team headed by a level 10 Knight Base and a level 15 Great Ascetic Monk was in the northern section of the Black Gate Mountains. Of course, this team is not prepared for the Dwarf Kingdom. Instead, when the king selection begins, the entire kingdom's eyes are focused on the royal court to perform some special task. However, as a last resort, the Archbishop can still send a message to them asking for help. It's not a last resort now. Archbishop Jeroni simply ordered the 3 action teams around the royal court to move closer to the Dwarf Holy Mountain. Try to cover your tracks as much as possible, and if possible, create some surprises for your opponents. Of course, the Magic Council did not let Archmage Serrano and the others fight alone. When Greed was riding on the back of a goat and marching stiffly towards the peak, he didn't know how many people were hiding, lurking, investigating, and fighting around the holy mountain for his safety. In fact, Gretel had exhausted all his strength just to keep up with the team. Ugh, it hurts. He slowly crawled out of the tent, stood up straight in the sun, and beat his back, waist, and legs. Yesterday I was stuck on the goat's back for a whole day, and there was no place in my body that didn't hurt. The dwarves all looked sideways. Gavin spoke quickly and already shouted. "Didn't you come up on a goat? That goat is the only one in the team with a saddle." And Bernard was pulling the sheep by the horns from beginning to end, without him having to worry about controlling it. Greed hesitated to speak. Fila was taciturn, Hannah was busy packing her things, and Jenna was silent again and again, sighing. "I remember that when you arrived at the royal court, you also rode in on goats, right? But it's not that steep along the way." Gretel bared his teeth and slapped his thigh. There were women present, so it was not easy for him to rub his inner thighs. God knows where the pain was the most. When you enter the royal court, you take the right path after all. It's nothing like here, except for ridges, rocks, and no roads at all. The slopes on both sides of the ridge exceed 60 degrees. You're too nervous. Prince Rosga came over to help him sit down. Seeing Greet inhaling hissingly, his facial features tangled together, he endured it again and again, and then opened his mouth to give him instructions. "Relax your waist, follow the goat's footsteps, and just follow it. If you are really afraid of falling, just hold the goat's horns, don't tighten your back, and don't hold the goat's belly between your legs." Greet nodded with a grimace. Jin Na and Gavin were squatting at a distance, muttering to each other, with flying eyes. "Oh, humans. Oh, mage. As long as you can walk, don't ask for too much. After all, we are not dwarves." Bernard squatted beside him without saying a word. "Pack the sleeping bag, pack the tent, set up the rocks, pour water into the pot, add bacon, potatoes, and cabbage." They all packed up and came over with the pot. "Boss." Greet helped him move over step by step. When he came to the stove made of stones, he patted the space bag and a pile of charcoal fell down. Then he stretched out his hand and flicked the flame, and the fire suddenly burst into flames in the stove. Sharp. It's comfortable to go out with the mage. Gretel, you are amazing. The teammates cheered, each reaching out for a bowl and receiving a bowl of hot soup. He toasted the hot pancakes by the fire, put a piece of cheese on it, and ate it in big gulps. Gretel, come here, a sandwich was stretched out from the side, but Gavin returned the favor and stabbed it directly under Greet's nose. You want to try our stuff too? With the dwarves watching eagerly, Gretel has no other choice but to accept this kindness. That thing is not so much a sandwich as it is two thick pieces of unleavened bread, solid, with a layer of cheese sandwiched inside, which is more than 1 centimeter thick. Greet struggled to open his mouth as wide as possible before he could take a bite of the pie and cheese. The goat cheese had a strong sour taste, and as soon as it touched the tip of his tongue, Gretel was immediately sour that his facial features twitched. The further you get to the top of the mountain, the colder the wind becomes, even in summer. Only by having a hot meal in the morning can you withstand the knife-like cold wind. Gretel managed to take a sip of the vegetable soup, swallowed the cheese sandwich, and comforted himself. Think of it as understanding the local flavor. They meandered along the ridge. The Herman Mountains are said to be formed from the bodies of giants, but in Greet's opinion, they are formed by the extrusion of the Earth's crust and have been eroded by glaciers for a long time. The mountain range is long and narrow, with more than a dozen peaks several thousand meters indistinctly connected. The ridges are steep and the walls stand like knives. At this moment, the group of people was heading north on the back of the sword. To the right is the vast wilderness, and to the left, as far as the eye can see, you can even see sparkling waves. There are steep hillsides on both sides, and a trail in the middle is only a few meters wide at its narrowest point, which can only allow a goat to jump across. When I raised my head, I saw the snow-capped sky, so close that I could reach out and touch it. The mountain wind howls. Greet gave himself the blessing of cold and heat resistance, and wanted to give it to others. Prince Rosga was the first to jump away, waving his hands in decline. No, no, no. According to the rules, we have to climb up on our own. Besides, the wind is nothing to us. You keep your spells and prepare for changes. Others followed suit and refused. Gretel could only shrink his hands silently, grabbed a handful of casting materials and put them in his pocket, ready to deal with special situations at any time. For example, releasing the feather falling technique for teammates, or throwing a dragon breath hand out. On this day's departure, the formation changed again. The shield warrior Fela took the lead, Prince Rothergar walked second, and Bernard walked in the middle pulling Gretel's goat. Hannah followed closely behind them, looking left and right. After Gavin and Jin Na broke up, the two of them got together and joked quietly from time to time. Gavin, don't talk, Prince Rosga suddenly turned around and scolded. Greet was stunned. What's wrong? There seems to be something wrong. Bernard tightened his hands and grabbed the horns of the sheep. The goat stopped immediately. He stood in front of Gretel, took a breath, closed his eyes, and listened. I always feel something is wrong, but I just can't tell. Boss, don't stop the protective spell on your body, keep it on. Gretel didn't think anything was wrong, but Bernard was so solemn that he repainted the mage armor, adding one to the front, back, left, and right. His left hand reached into his pocket and silently held a test tube of oxygen. At the same time, the dwarves also took off their weapons and took them all in their hands. Bernard had a goat's horn in one hand and a big bone club in the other, and he moved like a tiger in the team. Behind the rocks in the distance, a man in grey clothes lay down, pulling up his hood to cover his face. The clouds moved, and soon, his figure merged with the mountain rocks and could no longer be seen clearly. From morning to noon, from noon to afternoon, nothing happened. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Prince Rosga turned back and said to Gretel on the back of the sheep, Today we will arrive at the holy mountain and stop below the snow line. The goats can't climb up, so we have to find a place to settle them. Tomorrow we will climb up on 2 legs. There is a place for tying sheep nearby, right here in front. Some rocks may have fallen apart after not being used for too long. We were the first to arrive, so we need to repair it. The sun's shadow is slanting westward. Bernard had already begun to look left and right, looking for a place to camp tonight. Suddenly, the goats the team was riding became collectively restless. "Hold head high!" The head sheep screamed loudly. Gretel didn't even react, and his whole body was pushed backwards, almost falling over. At the critical moment, Bernard's hand holding the sheep's horn increased his strength in time and pressed down. "Hey!" Greet barely sat down. The other dwarves were not so lucky. They were carried by their mounts and turned around to escape. Those goats didn't even care about the sheep, turned their backs to the mountain, and ran away like crazy. The dwarves were heard shouting desperately. "Stop, stop, hold the goats, don't let them jump off the cliff, run along the ridge dash." What happened? Gretel didn't have time to ask, so he first slapped the protective spell on himself. Just after I took the second shot, there was a sharp roar above my head, and a huge sense of terror came over me. Before you even see it, it's already so overwhelming that you can't breathe. Greet looked up suddenly. White mist surges overhead, and snow and dust roll down like a wall. "Avalanche!" Gretel shouted. Suddenly, the body became light and Bernard was able to pick it up. The leader of the sheep beneath him let out a mournful cry, turned around and ran away. After running for 2 steps, a figure passed by. Bernard grabbed Greet's belt and ran faster than the leader of the sheep. "Run! Run! Run!" Greet had no time to protect himself, so he turned around and kept casting blessing spells on Bernard. Cat's lightness. Bear's tenacity. Power of the barbarian bull. Shield technique. Mage armor. Snow waves surge behind. Gretel didn't dare to look back, only hearing the dull thunderous sound approaching continuously, and the snow mist had already touched the upper part of Bernard's shoes. Suddenly, there was a loud noise ahead, and something huge fell from the sky, cutting off the path ahead. The 2 people were hit by the snow waves and couldn't stop the car, so they crashed into it. At the critical moment, Bernard picked up Greet, used a bone stick to support him, jumped on the thing, and then jumped from the other side. The snow waves rolled up and stirred up the waves of Laogeo, but finally stopped on it and did not continue to extend forward. "Hoo, ho, ho." Gretel held up his knees and gasped for air. He turned around, looked at the huge existence falling from the sky, took a few steps back, looked again, and stepped back again. "It's actually a dragon. Didn't we say that the dragon is still 700 or 800 miles away? Who dares to say Sister Lin fell from the sky? Who am I to bite? Double monthly passes from today to September 30th. From today to September 30th, from 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening, the crowdfunding reward is 1,500 points, and the author can receive 4 monthly tickets. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please give me a reward. You all give rewards from 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening. Don't waste your monthly pass by leaving it at another time. Heart hurts. There will be an additional update tomorrow. If you reward enough and are lucky enough, there will be another update the day after tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 383. The thing that fell in front of Greet was indeed a dragon. To be precise, it's a silver dragon. If Greet's eyes were not snow-blind and the color recognition was accurate, the color of the scales of the dragon in front of him would indeed be bright silver. As for the size of the dragon, the silver dragon came across and blocked the entire mountain road. The long neck drooped on one side, and the tail drooped on the other side, soft and drooping. Gretel stood in front of it, trying to stand on tiptoes. The height of his head was not higher than his back or belly. Gretel stepped back, and then stepped back, and then stepped back again. The view in front of him ranged from a silver wall, to a silver mountain, to a silver dragon. However, he was not a decorator. He could estimate the height of a human by visual inspection, but he could not tell how long the silver dragon was. Therefore, even if he carried a lot of information about the body length, tail length, age, and combat effectiveness of various dragons, Greet looked at the silver dragon in front of him, but there was no data to compare, and he didn't know how good he was at fighting. But it doesn't matter. Anyway, first of all, he definitely couldn't beat such a big silver dragon. Secondly, the silver dragon fell down and was motionless. It was probably either dead or fainted, so it definitely wouldn't hit him. In other words, are you dead or fainted? Gretel calmed down his breathing, poked his head out from behind Bernard, and observed carefully. As soon as he took a look, he was pulled behind by the barbarian. "Boss, back off." Bernard held the bone stick tightly, his body slightly arched, blocking Gretel's front. One kick forward, one kick behind, the head of the stick pointing diagonally, ready to rush forward and attack at any time. Or, if the silver dragon is repelled, it will not somersault down the hillside, and it can more or less block Gretel's block. Greet pulled his clothes hard from behind. A long time ago, Archmage Carlyle mentioned that the relationship between the Parliament and the Dragon Clan was very good. Especially certain dragons in the Ice Peaks and Great Wasteland of the North, the Archmage often visits there when he travels. So, if possible, save it. Bernard, help me see if that silver dragon is still alive. Gretel whispered. The silver dragon has been motionless since it was smashed down, with its head and tail hanging on the hillsides on both sides, tilting downward at an angle of more than 60 degrees. On the body surface, at least on the side facing Gretel, there were no wounds or bloodstains. There is no rise and fall in the chest and abdomen, the nostrils. Sorry, my head is resting behind a stone and I can't see my nostrils clearly. Bernard blocked him behind him and refused to move. Greet pulled him twice and pushed him again. It's okay. That's the silver dragon. He's smart, can communicate, and is said to have a good temper. Please help me see if he's injured and needs our help. The council has a good relationship with the silver dragon. After a few pushes, Bernard took the first step. As soon as he stood still, he changed the direction of the bone stick and poked it back. Boss, stay back. Wounded beasts are the most ferocious. If it gets seriously injured and falls into a stupor, I can't protect you. Gretel's answer was to replenish him with a whole set of protective magic. Bernard held the bone stick at an angle and moved forward slowly. In the first step, the knees sank down. In the second step, the waist was bent even lower, and the rocks under the feet clicked. In the third step, the bone stick in the hand fell to the ground, the knees trembled, and sweat poured out from behind. He tried his best to lift his feet and wanted to take the fourth step, but he couldn't take it anyway. He lifted his feet several times and dropped them back to the original position several times. His breathing became heavier and heavier, and beads of sweat pattered on his forehead. After a while, a small piece of it was wet on the ground. What's wrong? Greet was surprised. He walked quickly behind Bernard. No problem. He walked around and parallel to him. No problem. One step further. Old, boss. Can't go any further. Long way. Gretel suddenly thought of it. Whether it is online articles or games from previous lives, or information seen in the Mage Tower after traveling through time, They all point out one thing: dragons carry the power of the dragon. For creatures whose ranks are lower than dragons, it will cause some kind of pressure, making them instinctively feel fear and want to escape. This kind of dragon power does not disappear due to the dragon's sleep, injury, or coma. In fact, data points out that even dragons that have been dead for many years still retain the power of the dragon in their bones, and can even form a powerful force field in the dragon's tomb. As for why I don't feel it? Gretel touched his chest. In the chest pocket, where I usually put pens, there is the precious endless ink pen. One of the abilities that comes with this pen is that it is immune to attacks from illusions and soul control spells below level 5. Long way, fearless. Gretel waved his hand to the barbarian, motioning him to step back, and walk step by step to the silver dragon. He raised his hand and touched it. The scales were smooth and clean, and the tentacles were cold and moist. With a gentle touch, a thin layer of water vapor was wiped down. I don't know if it was the mist in the clouds or the fresh snow foam. Greet put her hands on the scales and wiped them all the way towards the silver dragon's chest. As I walked, my palm was suddenly pushed, as if something was rising silently. Heartbeat. Is it a heartbeat? Or breathe? Gretel quickly put his palms together completely. The movement under his palm disappeared again. He took out his stethoscope and poked it to listen. He waited for a full minute but did not hear any heartbeat. By the way, how many times per minute should silver dragon's heartbeat be? In theory, the larger the creature, the slower the heart rate should be. The heartbeat rate of an elephant seems to be 30 times a minute. The heartbeat rate of a blue whale is said to be 4 to 8 times a minute. A silver dragon, a silver dragon. Bernard, help me pull it, and I'll see if it's breathing, cried Gretel. He took out a rope from his space bag, tied it tightly to the barbarian's bone club, and tied the other end to himself. Then he used magic to make an activated rope, tied it as usual, climbed on the silver dragon's neck, and rubbed it down step by step. As I climbed, my feet slipped all the way. Greet had to throw himself a cat's light spirit to increase his agility before he could safely climb to the side of the faucet. He stretched out his hand to explore near his nostrils, and a stream of hot air immediately sprayed onto his hands. Gretel flinched. Fortunately, I had packed a lot of protection beforehand, so I wasn't burned by the breath. However, there is breathing but no heartbeat, there is breathing but no heartbeat. This situation is very critical. Without a heartbeat, the blood carrying oxygen cannot be transported to the whole body. If it cannot be transported to the whole body, the brain and various organs will be deprived of oxygen. From hypoxia to necrosis, it only takes a few minutes. Of course, the silver dragon is huge and has lower breathing and heartbeat rates than humans, so it should be able to last longer. But that doesn't mean that if you leave it alone, it will wake up automatically. Greet was in trouble. If the heart has stopped but breathing is still possible, the first aid measures that should be taken are undoubtedly chest compressions and cardiac resuscitation. Now the question arises, how to perform CPR on a dragon? Chest compressions. Gretel looked at Silver Dragon's physique and then at his own small arms and legs. It was very clear that he couldn't press it. Not to mention pressing it, there is probably no way to let him take a few steps back, bump into him, and press with all the strength of his body. Press with powerful mage hand? If it's not strong enough to break a rib, there's no need to talk about it. The maximum output of powerful mage hand is 40 pounds for one hand, and 400 pounds for 10. Even if a 400-pound hammer hits it, it will break at most a few dragon scales, but the dragon's ribs will definitely not be broken. Lift the silver dragon up on his back, then jump up and down on his chest, and press with gravity. Great idea, who will help? Greet was in trouble. Seeing that he was motionless, Bernard stood outside Longway's range of influence and shouted from a distance. "Boss, what are you going to do? I want its heart to beat again." How? Compression. Like before. Bernard, a 7th level barbarian warrior, has always been Gretel's extra cardiac resuscitation assistant with his amazing strength. But this time, Gretel looked back at him and took 2 steps away. Can you press it? Let me try. Gretel threw an inspiration technique with his backhand. Judging from the reaction after the operation, this thing is like a shot of adrenaline, which can make people's heart beat faster, blood pressure rise, and ignore fear to a certain extent. Bernard's whole body was shaken, his hair stood on end, and his body seemed to have grown in size. Flat end bone stick, back up, start, approach, rush. With a roar, the end of the bone rod hit the silver dragon. Greet stood nearby and felt the ground shaking 3 times. Looking at the silver dragon again, the brilliance on the scales is flowing, like a living thing, with a slight dent. How deep is the depression? 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters. Gone. Can it be more important? I'll try again. Bernard backed away again. This time, he retreated further and rushed faster. On the top of the bone stick, a giant beast rose up faintly, raised its head and roared, and hit the silver dragon together. Boom. The width of the depression is 5 centimeters. Greet was discouraged. To perform cardiac resuscitation on normal adults, the compression depth should be at least 5 centimeters, yin long. According to cardiac resuscitation standards, the depth is calculated as 1/3 of the anteroposterior diameter of the thorax. Bernard's impact was estimated to be less than 1/10 of the standard depth. If it were a human being, the surgeon would have one last resort as a last resort, open the chest wide, put his hand in, and compress the heart under direct vision. But this is a silver dragon. Gretel searched all over his body. It is estimated that no weapon can do this. Even if we call Prince Rosga back and use the newly made axe to cut the sternum, and luckily make the cut, then what? Looking at the size of the silver dragon, I was afraid that I wouldn't have to climb in completely if I performed heart compressions under direct vision. Gretel thought about it and ruled out all methods of using kinetic energy to perform cardiac resuscitation. Still, let's take the last resort. DC cardioversion. Then he immediately froze. For normal human external defibrillation, the energy required for atrial flutter is 50-100 joules, supraventricular tachycardia is about 100 joules, atrial fibrillation is 100-150 joules, and ventricular tachycardia is 200 joules. What about the silver dragon? What about the silver dragon? Then, how many joules is the output, or energy, of an electric spell attack? How long does it take to pass through the body? What is the appropriate discharge time point? The automatic defibrillator can automatically detect the ECG signal, synchronize the discharge time with the R wave of the ECG, and avoid the ventricular vulnerability period, but he can't. Also, where should the electrode pads be attached? For humans, it is theoretically attached to the apex of the heart and the second intercostal space on the right chest. But who will tell me, where are the apex and second rib of the dragon? There is no other way, let the dead dragon be the living dragon doctor. If you don't take action to heal, you will definitely die. If you take action to heal, there is a glimmer of hope that you can live. Gretel took a deep breath. Open your hands and aim at the left and right chest of Yinlong, with one hand high and the other low. This is the first time of direct current cardioversion. I don't know how many joules the electric claws have. Let's start. Today is the last day of September with double monthly passes. From tomorrow to October 4th, the monthly pass is still double. From 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening, the crowdfunding reward is 1,500 points, and the author can receive 4 monthly tickets. You all give rewards from 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening. Don't waste your monthly pass by leaving it at another time. Heart hurts. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please give me a reward. The last monthly pass for this month and the guaranteed monthly pass for next month must be left to me. Thanks to @Red Comet Mars for the reward of 30,000 starting coins. Thanks to @Yamengbing for the 1,500 starting coins. Thanks to @ONI who loves to play roller coasters, @Ruler and Compass for the 100 starting coins reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 384. Lightning flew out of his fingertips. Gretel held his breath and watched the silver arc of electricity shoot out, expand, and hit the silver dragon. Then, the electric sparks exploded and flashed out along the dragon's scales. From the front to the dragon's neck, back to the dragon's tail, it climbed up to the back of the silver dragon, and then disappeared from Gretel's sight. Finish. Nothing happened. The silver dragon lay on its side on the ground, motionless, as if the electric claw had not touched its body at all. This. Gretel was confused. He didn't learn the electric claw spell very well. In fact, he didn't learn very well any spells that couldn't be used for medical treatment, especially all offensive spells. Especially the electric spells, which are always nonsense. What is the voltage of this power generation attack? How much current? AC or DC? How often? Is there a voltmeter or ammeter for me to measure? I really can't afford a pen. Wait, why are there electric balls? The output of ball lightning cannot be so small. With all these random thoughts, one can imagine the level of Gretel's electric magic. So much so that when he came to Archmage Carlyle with a hand-cranked generator and the concept of alternating current, the Archmage was puzzled. With your level of electrical magic, how did you discover this kind of current? The Lord of Thunder didn't even do it. When the book is used, no, when the magic is used, it will be less regrettable. Gretel's level of electric magic is only this, so he doesn't know what the problem is because the silver dragon hasn't woken up yet. Is the voltage not high enough? The maximum voltage of DC cardioversion for adults is as high as 3500-3700 volts. How high voltage should be used for Yinlong? Is the current not strong enough? The maximum current of the EAD is between 50 and 60 amps. Silver dragons all have magic resistance. I wonder if this magic resistance can be converted into resistance. Is the discharge time too long? Each discharge time of the EAD is only 3 to 10 milliseconds, and it is stuck in the R-wave period of the electrocardiogram. If the discharge time is too long, or falls in the vulnerable period of the heart, it will damage the heart instead. Of course, if it is during ventricular fibrillation and there is no cardiac cycle and no QRS wave, then we can touch and discharge at any time. Greed looked at the silver dragon up and down, digging his toes into his shoes, almost wanting to draw an electrocardiogram on the spot. In the awkward silence, Bernard coughed and spoke in a deep voice. Boss. This is the silver dragon. I know. The silver dragon's scales are silver. That's the color, not that it's actually made of silver, huh? Gretel suddenly came to his senses. Silver dragon is a kind of metal dragon. This type is not classified in vain, maybe its scales are really very conductive? Just when the electric claw was applied, the electric sparks spread all over the dragon's scales, maybe it was true. So how to verify it? How to verify that it is the dragon scales that conduct electricity, rather than the dragon being born with magic resistance and immune to low-level magic? Greed held his chin with his left hand, put his thumb against the soft flesh underneath, and rubbed it in circles. After rubbing it for the third time, his eyes lit up and he jumped up. Yes. He lowered his head and rummaged through the space bag and pulled out a compass. Archmage Serrano was afraid that something might happen to him, so even though he walked with the dwarf team the whole time, he still stuffed a compass into him, just in case he got lost and could try to find it. If the dwarf's holy mountain was not on land and had no corresponding coordinates, I'm afraid even a sextant could be given to him. Gretel took apart the compass in twos and twos, took out the magnetic needle, and hung it up with a thick cotton thread. Put it into Bernard's hand, ask him to take 2 steps away, and hang the magnetic needle next to the dragon scale. Breathe, breathe, take a deep breath, stretch out your hands, and cast the spell again. The second DC cardioversion, I don't know how many joules the electric claws have, start. There was a flash of electric sparks. 3 steps away, Bernard lowered his voice for fear of alarming the silver dragon. Boss. The magnetic needle is spinning. It's spinning. Okay, really conductive. Greed took a step back, moved up and down, left and right, stood on tiptoes, squatted down close to the ground, and observed the dragon scales. If it were densely covered all over the body without any gaps, it would be equivalent to the silver dragon wearing a Faraday cage next to its body. When ordinary current is applied, I feel nothing. So how to do electrical cardioversion? Do you want me to cut open the dragon scales and install a pacemaker? Don't even think about the pacemaker, there's no place to file the materials. Gretel thought for a while, then took out a dagger from his space bag, his best dagger, blessed with demonized weapon, and threw it to Bernard. Come on, do me a favor and pry off this dragon scale. Boss. Just pry off 2 dragon scales. One on the upper right and one on the lower left. Hey, hurry up, the dragon will die if you move too slowly. Greed urged him repeatedly, but the barbarian could only put the bone stick between his legs and use all his strength to pry the dragon scales. The scales on the silver dragon's body are smooth, flat, and dense, making it almost impossible to remove. Bernard scratched, poked, and stabbed several times before he inserted the sharp point of the dagger. Hey! His biceps, triceps, brachioradialis, and flexor carpi radialis muscles bulged at the same time, and he pried hard. With a squeaking sound, the dragon scale, half the size of a palm, was slightly lifted up, with the root still attached. And the dagger that Greed handed over was mostly in Bernard's hand, and the tip was embedded under the dragon's scales. It was broken, broken, broken. Gretel. Boss, it's okay, I still have the dagger here. Bernard took out another one himself and stretched it out in front of Gretel. Greed looked at it for a moment, and was doubtful about the quality of the dagger, so he threw the demonized weapon over. He doesn't know how to look at the texture of the weapon, but he hopes it's strong enough. Fortunately, Bernard is still very good at picking weapons. The quality of this dagger is much better than Gretel's. One piece of dragon scale was pried off, and then another. After prying, he still had some strength left, so he followed Greed's instructions and cut a hole in the dragon's skin under the scales. This dragon skin should be non-conductive. Gretel muttered quietly. He gestured and asked Bernard to insert the 2 daggers into the dragon's skin. By the way, get some copper wire and wrap it around the dagger. Wrap it around and around, from the dagger body to the dagger handle, all the way up. Add another wooden stick and stand it high, making sure there is no dragon scales on it at all. After everything was completed, Gretel asked the barbarians to step back and mobilized magical power again. The third DC cardioversion, the maximum output of the electric claws, start. The blue and white electric light danced. From the top of the dagger under the collarbone on the right side of the silver dragon's chest to the top of the dagger on the left side of the chest. This time, there was no more lightning flowing on the dragon scales, and the magnetic needle in Bernard's hand did not move in any direction. It seems a little better than before. But the silver dragon still didn't move. Gretel gritted his teeth and continued to cast spells. Electric light flashed one after another, and electric arcs hit the ends of the 2 daggers and flowed into the silver dragon's body. After 10 times in a row, the silver wall in front of me actually moved. "Boss, back off!" roared Bernard. He never expected Greet's reaction speed. While shouting, he rushed over, grabbed Greet and ran away. After running for 17 or 8 steps, there was a heavy sound of wind behind me, and something was thrown directly over. The barbarian pushed Gretel down and threw him to the ground. The sound of wind passed over their backs, made a circle, and retracted towards the silver dragon. Gretel threw himself on the ground and ate a mouthful of dust. He pressed his palms to the ground, which hurt. He didn't have time to turn around and already shouted with all his strength. "We are saving you." Woo buzz. A high-pitched and clear moan. Greet felt a tightness in his chest. Bernard beside him had just propped up his body and took him a step forward. His feet felt weak again. Greet struggled to hold him up with his shoulders and continued to shout. "We mean no harm. You just fell. Your heart stopped. You can't move. We are saving you. We are not harming you." Behind me, a strong wind blew. The breathless pressure actually eased. Bernard sighed and stood upright. Greet held the barbarian's bone club to steady himself. He turned around and saw that the dragon had stood up. Huge wings that were enough to cover the entire body were spread out behind him. With just a slight flap, the strong wind made the person unable to stand. Piles of snow were piled up on the silver dragon's back, and it was now being blown away by the pair of wings. Snow and fog covered the sky and the sun Greet through his head and face, but still tried his best to stand upright and look. The silver dragon standing up straight has an extremely elegant posture that makes people unable to take their eyes away from it. Its trunk is slender, and the diameter of its thorax is only half as thick as the end of its head and neck. However, the visual effect is not thin. Long thorns support the membrane, and a wide ridge extends from the top of its head to its back and then to the end of its tail. Even the skin is covered with thorns, like a row of silver manes, gently draped and swaying in the wind. Sparkling, water-like silver light flows from the top of the head to the end of the long tail. The strong front legs support the body, and the claws are like hooks, digging deeply into the rock. The silver dragon lowered his head and looked at Gretel with his silver blue eyes. Soon, he lowered his head to look at his chest. Gretel's heart skipped a beat. The 2 daggers on the left and right chest of the silver dragon are still stuck there and have not fallen. He immediately raised his voice. "That dagger is to save you. Your heart has stopped beating, and the dragon scales resist the electric current. We can only use this method. Only by sending electric current into your body can your heart resume beating." Silver dragon remained silent. It raised its right paw and made a slight move. 2 mage hands immediately appeared and pulled out the dagger. There seemed to be a little liquid splashing out, and white light immediately appeared, healing the wound properly. The mage's hand continued to move upward, sending the dagger to the silver dragon. On the handles of the 2 daggers, there were shiny copper wires in circles, and the ends were very long. Silver dragon tilted his head and blinked, seeming a little curious. It looked down at itself again, and leaned down again. The long neck stretched forward, straight in front of Greet. "Human, how dare you pick my scales?" The tone was majestic and condescending. However, that voice was crisp and delicate, just like a girl's. Today is the last day of September with double monthly passes. From tomorrow to October 4th, the monthly pass is still double. From 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening, the crowdfunding reward is 1,500 points, and the author can receive 4 monthly tickets. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please give me a reward. Asking for the last monthly ticket this month. Please give me a guaranteed monthly ticket for next month. Thanks to @bookfriend 202005100532192008 for the reward of 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 385. Greet said ouch. He immediately lowered his head and looked at the palm of his hand. What about dragon scales? What about dragon scales? The dragon scales pried off the silver dragon's chest are drop-shaped, half the size of a palm, with one end slightly pointed and the other rounded. It is light and airy when held in the hand, translucent when viewed from the front, and shimmering silver light flows when viewed from the side. When you hold it up to your eyes and take a closer look, you can see that there are fine lines one after another from the inside to the outside, which are extremely delicate. Bernard pried it off and handed it to him. He just. Where did it go? Greet rummaged around in a panic. There is no space bag, there is no left pocket, there is no right pocket, there is no left trouser pocket, right trouser pocket, and even the bottoms of the pockets have been rummaged through, and they are all gone. Where did it go? No matter where it went, the other party was a female dragon, a female dragon. Even if it was just to save her, you pried 2 dragon scales off her chest, stuffed them into her pocket, and never returned them. Gretel himself felt that whether he went to the Magic Council to judge or went to Dragon Island to judge, if there was one, he would definitely be at fault. If you were in the hospital in your previous life, don't say anything and just write the examination first. If the examination is not sincere or in-depth, the medical department will not let you go. After. Whether you can pass the test later depends on the patient and the patient's family, and whether they can talk to each other. Is this okay to talk to? Greet looked up, and the silver dragon was lowering its head, stretching its long neck in front of him, staring at him intently. The silver blue eyes were sparkling, the thorns on the sides of the ears and the top of the head spread out, and the misty snow light shone from behind, as if she was wearing a small crown. From a distance, she looked beautiful and elegant, but once she got closer, her head alone was as big as Gretel's entire person. Looking over like this, Greet couldn't even hold the front with both hands. He stretched his arms from the front teeth and couldn't reach the farthest molar. The breath whizzed in the nostrils, hitting Greet in puffs. Mr. Mage, where are my scales? Greet hurriedly groped again. Not in my pockets, not in my trouser pockets, not in my space pocket. Just when he was almost lying on the ground, searching for broken needles as he did in the operating room, he accidentally lowered his head and saw a little water reflected in his chest pocket into his eyes. Those 2 precious dragon scales were inserted together with the endless ink pen. Gretel hurriedly took it out and offered it with both hands. The movement was too hasty, and his palm scratched the edge of the dragon scale, making a gash on the spot. The edge of the palm first turned white, then turned red, and the next moment, blood gurgled out. Greet screamed softly. He had to take care of the dragon scales and treat himself, so he was in a hurry. At this moment, Yinlong suddenly said hey, lowered his head a little, and sniffed him. You smell different. Gretel quickly backed away. Not only did he retreat, he also quickly threw out a wind barrier to stand between him and the silver dragon. I haven't showered in 2 days. That's not it. You have a different smell, Yinlong retorted seriously. Before he finished speaking, a ball of white light fell on Gretel's hand. He watched as the wound stopped bleeding, converged, healed, and became as calm as before. As soon as Greet thanked him, the 2 dragon scales automatically floated up in front of the silver dragon, and then automatically fell back to their original positions on the chest. Oh, I can't grow any longer. Silver Dragon complained slightly. The voice is clear, delicate, and crisp. After speaking, he raised his head and extended a paw to Gretel. Mr. Master, how do you want to compensate me? This, girl, we are doing an emergency rescue, but we don't want to have to pay for the clothes if we cut them off. Gretel cursed in his heart, but he also knew that prying off the dragon scales and not returning them was not the same thing as cutting clothes. He patted the space bag without hesitation. This, and this. The silver dragon's front legs are longer than Gretel's height, and one claw stretches out. The hook on the claw alone is longer than Gretel's hand. The contents of the space bag crashed and fell into the heart of the silver dragon's claws, spreading out into a small patch, shining brightly. Gold coins, silver coins, various magic items. Cold and heat resistant ring. Water purification technique ring. Bright amulet. The holy emblem of the Church of the Lord of Glory. 1, 2, 3. There is also a set of armor and weapons whose origins have been forgotten. It seems that they are also captured items given to him by Lin En, from the glorious Holy See. In addition to the Mew heart given by Elder Irwin, the corpse explosion ring given by Master Lin En, and the arcane eye ring given by Master Hemond, Greed took out almost all the magic items in the space bag. The colorful lights are everywhere and the eyes are dazzling. And, of course, gold coins. Greed picked up the bottom corner of the space bag and knocked it down. Soon, a small mountain was piled up in the heart of the silver dragon's claws. Oops! Silver dragon's nostrils twitched, and another gust of hot wind blew in his face. There was a pop in front of Gretel, and the mage's armor shattered, regenerated, and shattered again. Then, the level 4 force field shield stood silently in front of Gretel. Girl, you are so excited. Gretel quickly took 2 steps back. The silver dragon raised its claws, and as soon as it moved, several gold coins rolled to the ground. She simply blew a breath, and all the gold coins and magic items in her claws suddenly floated up, forming a hollow sphere that kept spinning. She stretched out the tip of her claws and plucked. This is not good. This is so-so. This, it stinks. After fiddling with it for a long time, he waved his claws, and all the gold coins and magic items fell down, as if a golden rain fell in front of Gretel's feet. In Silver Dragon Claw's heart, there were only a few wooden, silver, and gold holy emblems and talismans left. The white lights were dotted, and they all obviously came from the Church of the Lord of Glory. Humph, annoying. What a nasty guy. The most annoying. She raised her claws, threw the amulet, armor, and weapons into her mouth, and started chewing them. Large and small white lights flashed between the teeth and suddenly shattered. Greet screamed from below. Hello. How? Chew some of it? Be careful, it gets stuck in your throat. Forget about the talisman, after all, it is small and will get stuck in the teeth at most. But there is also a set of armor and weapons. If that giant sword is not chewed up, it will get stuck in the esophagus, pierce the esophagus, and hit the aorta. With the size of the silver dragon, there was nothing he could do to save it. Silver Dragon laughed crisply. She simply lay down and closed her eyes, looking very comfortable. The tail flicked and flicked behind it, splashing countless snow foam. After lying down, Gretel saw that there were spots on her back and wings, and there were quite a lot of damage. Some had broken scales, some had skin rolled to both sides, and some were black and smoky, looking like a fight. There was also a large tear on the right wing, as long as one person, which was shocking to see. How long does it take to sew? You have to use the thickest number 10 thread. Each of the 4 people is responsible for a section and seams at the same time. With such a high tension on the dragon's wings, I'm afraid I can only tie a surgical knot. After all the sewing is done, I estimate that I will have to work overtime until 10 p.m. No, now that I have traveled through time, I can use healing techniques. Gretel subconsciously raised his hand. A cure minor injury shot passed over, and the dragon wings fluttered slightly, showing almost no signs of healing. Another one fell on the dragon scales. The scales seemed to be a little attached, but the broken parts did not grow properly. It's better to sew directly. At least the sewing is done and it looks like they are connected on the outside. No, the dragon scales are so strong, and the dragon skin is so tough, a surgical curved needle probably won't be able to penetrate it. Oh, Mr. Mage, no need, the silver dragon lay on the ground and flicked its tail. She chewed those holy symbols, and the hazy white light shattered in her mouth piece by piece, and soon floated out and fell all over her body. If they did it, use their stuff to treat it? The white light swept over the body, scales, membranes, wings, large and small wounds, and it didn't take long for them to heal one by one. Greet watched intently and suddenly asked, "Did someone from the glorious Holy See beat you?" "They're not here to beat me. They're here to beat my aunt. They're hiding in ambush, and if I break through, they'll beat me." Yinlong wrinkled his nose and snorted. She then stuck her head out again and sniffed Greet. "Mr. Master, what's your name? What are you doing here?" "Gretel Nordmark. I came up with the Dwarf King Select team. We want to climb to the top of the peak and then go back down after the sacrifice," Gretel answered in a straightforward manner. He still wanted to ask her name, but Yinlong snorted, and the fire in his breath almost set him on fire. "Gretel Nordmark. I remember you." She suddenly stood up and spread her wings. Once, twice, and after several slaps, it slowly rose. It circled around Greet's head for a few times, then suddenly turned and flew straight north. Over the top of the mountain and through the clouds. Soon, the silver body disappeared in the dusk. Gretel plopped down on the ground. "Who says you won't meet a dragon? Who said that there are still 700 or 800 miles away from the dragon's nest? Even if you climb to the top of the mountain, you will definitely not encounter a dragon. Wait, that silver dragon said that he has a different smell. What is it?" Greet smelled the back of her hands and then her palms. She also took out all the bits and pieces on her body and smelled them one by one. The placket, cuffs, the surface of the space bag, the endless ink pen in the chest pocket, the pendant of unknown material that has been hanging around the original owner's neck and he has not taken it off. "Sorry, I don't smell anything except sweat and dust. I have to find a way to take a shower. After going down the mountain, find a place to take a shower quickly. How about wiping your clothes with snow first?" Gretel hesitated and walked towards the hillside. "Use the mage's hands to gather a handful of snow, then gather another handful of snow, and wipe the leather jacket carefully." By the time they were almost wiping up and down, the sky was already completely dark, and there were loud shouts in the distance. The dwarves led the goats and came over with 1 foot high and 1 foot low. "Gretel. You're okay, that's great." They stayed one night at a nearby campsite and spent the next day climbing the mountain on 2 legs. Gretel worked hard with his hands empty, and climbed to the top of the mountain desperately. He watched the dwarves clear a flat piece of snow, lay the armor and weapons they carried on their backs flat on it, surround the flat ground, and sing sacrificial songs. "I don't know how they can find the energy to sing on the top of this snow-capped peak, even if it's hard to breathe while standing." After singing one song, he sang another one. It took 1 day to climb from the snow line to the top, and another day to get down from the peak to the snow line. The group of people rode on the goats and returned along the ridge. As dusk approached, a silver-haired girl suddenly walked out on the mountain road ahead. "Hey! Mr. Mage, and these guys, where are you going? Can we share some company? From today to October 4th, monthly tickets are still doubled. From 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening, the crowdfunding reward is 1500 points, and the author can receive 4 monthly tickets. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please give me a reward. Please give me the guaranteed monthly ticket, meow. Thanks to @Bendashu and @10myth for the 1500 starting coins. Thanks to @Simagaiway for the 500 starting coin reward. Thanks to @Bookfriend1304022346406409 for the 100 starting coins reward. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 386. The mountain road immediately became quiet. The shield warrior fella walked first and immediately grabbed the goat. As soon as he stopped, the team stopped one after another. Only Prince Rozga urged his mount and hurried forward. Looking up, he saw the silver-haired girl walking across from her with brisk steps. Her leather armor outlined her slender figure, and she was carrying a longbow that was taller than a person. There is a quiver hanging on one side of his waist, and a slightly curved long knife hanging on the other side. Judging from his dress, he can tell at a glance that he is a ranger. Prince Rozga immediately urged the goat and stepped forward quickly. The other party is an archer, so it's okay to be well-intentioned, but if he has a little malice, the closer he is, the faster he can rush to the other party as quickly as possible. In this way, the entire team will be safer. Taking a few steps forward, I saw the girl's long ears tilted up and exposed from the tips of her hair. There is a silver garland on the waterfall of silver hair. In the center of the garland, a drop-shaped silver-blue gemstone is embedded, reflecting the girl's eyes of the same color, shining brightly. Prince Rozga immediately breathed a sigh of relief. It was an elf. The person walking across from me turned out to be an elf ranger. Although they are both immortal species, dwarves and elves do not get along well with each other, but they are definitely not enemies. What's more, in recent times, elves have traveled far across the Turquoise Sea, and only a handful of them have traveled to the mainland. The two sides don't even have much contact, and there is no possibility of friction. This elf lady came over with a longbow on her back and said hello from a distance. It seemed that she was indeed kind. He also smiled and waved. Okay, let's set up camp together. I am Rozga, the son of the contemporary king. I have just completed the king selection ceremony and am on my way back to the royal court. Miss, what do you call me? Where are you going? My name is Cyrilla. The silver-haired girl walked over quickly. The goat that Prince Rozga was riding murmured and shrank back. The girl smiled softly, stretched out her hand to touch the horns of the sheep, and held them tightly to prevent them from moving. Come to travel on the mainland and look around. Are you going to the royal court? Can you take me with you? Okay, welcome. That's great. I haven't been there yet. I heard that there is lava flowing in that mountain, and the dwarves all use lava to make iron. Is this true? Of course it's true. The elves have disappeared on the mainland for a long time. Prince Rozga only saw them once when he was young. It has been more than 100 years. Seeing this elf lady being curious, he introduced her smoothly. Look at the armor I'm wearing, it's made of magma from the furnace. Greed followed silently, without saying a word. What an elf, what an archer, it's obviously a dragon. That shining silver hair and those silver blue eyes were exactly the same as the silver dragon I met 2 days ago. Why can't you recognize it? Okay, I really can't recognize it. Before the silver dragon fell down, the goats fled in all directions, and the dwarves were taken out for an unknown distance. When they found it in the dark, the silver dragon had already repaired its injuries and flew an unknown distance to the north. Greed had more things to do than less things to do. He didn't mention the story of meeting the dragon to them. This sudden arrival of an elf, Rozga, and the others, of course cannot think of the dragon. Cyrilla and the dwarf prince chatted all the way. It was dusk, and after not walking far, we arrived at the campsite for that night. While there was still a little afterglow in the west, the dwarves spread out to dig stoves, set up tents, fetch water and make fires, and were very busy. Greed is a mage. Originally, all he had to do was throw his luggage out of the space bag, and he could leave other things to others. But he was not idle either. He was very busy helping Bernard deliver ropes, ground nails, and tent poles. Suddenly, The silver dragon girl squatted over with a smile, pinched her nose behind his back and shouted. Master, Mr. Master. Gretel jumped up instinctively. As soon as he moved, he suddenly stiffened, lost his balance, and fell back. A slender hand touched his back at the right time, and with a careless lift, he stood up. Mr. Master, are you free? I have something to ask. When you're free, before Greet could reply, Gavin on the other side had already turned his head and replied with a big smile. Don't worry, he will definitely be free. Gretel, go chat with Miss Elf. We will finish setting up the tent in no time. The dwarves all smiled and waved. Bernard looked at Gretel and then at the silver-haired girl, frowning slightly but not able to speak. Gretel waved to him and followed Sarala about 10 steps away to the edge of the campsite. The dusk is deep. The bonfire was crackling, and the silver dragon girl's dazzling silver hair was completely plated with gold and red. She smiled and stretched out her hand to Gretel. Let's get acquainted again. My name is Sarala Moonlight Fleischgrit, and my race, you should know. Salara Moonlight Shining Light, Greet pondered, reaching out and shaking her hand gently. The silver dragon girl's eyes lit up and she nodded happily. You can speak our language? That's right. My family and friends all call me Uehui, and you can call me the same. By the way, what did you do that day? Why did you do it to me? Wake up. After I went back, I tried many times, but never succeeded. As she entered her youth, her parents finally allowed her to travel long distances by herself. 2 days ago, I went to visit my aunt. I was attacked and I managed to escape. After she woke up, she flew back to her aunt, complained to the police, and received treatment on the way. She also talked about a young mage who inserted 2 daggers into her chest and used an electric claw to wake her up. But I did wake up, and the little mage looked so clumsy that it was hard to pry off my dragon scales, and it didn't look like he could hurt me, so I didn't hurt him. Aren't I great? Maybe, he did save you. The elders of the clan actually said this. Sarala was very surprised. After watching the tribesmen ambush the human adventure group, she also tried to find a target herself. However, under the electric current, either they will continue to be in a coma, or they will simply die, and no one will wake up. No, she must understand why. So, after traveling 800 miles north, she traveled 800 miles south and found Greet again. This time, she will never leave until she understands. Upon hearing her question, Gretel instantly wanted to die. Miss, how did you try? Direct electric shock? Or stab 2 daggers into their chests? No matter what the operation is, the possibility of death is high, but the possibility of survival is too small. If you were not a silver dragon, or rather a dragon, I would never dare to treat you like this. Well, you want to say why? Did you know that the body can conduct electricity? He was sweating profusely and reluctantly explained. Your heart is made up of many, many small cells. When they receive electrical signals, they know whether they should contract or open. What are cells? Greet silently took out the microscope. When it was time to find a suitable platform for slides, cover slips, and common specimens, the silver dragon girl stood up and walked to the edge, grabbed a large stone half a person's height, and dragged it over. There was a long mark on the ground. Looking at her effortless way, it looked like she was dragging a piece of foam plastic. This piece is not flat enough. Greet turned around and looked around. Before she finished speaking, there was a clear ringing in her ears. The silver dragon girl drew her sword out of its sheath and waved it casually. Cold light flashed, and the surface of the stone was smooth, like a mirror. This kind of force is really worth it. Greet swallowed silently. Bernard could also pull such a stone, and he could do so effortlessly. However, to swing the knife so lightly and cut the stone into 2 pieces. Forget it, Bernard only knows how to throw rocks. Is it ready to use? Okay, okay. Come on, look at it this way. He set up the microscope and directed the silver dragon girl to bring her eyes to the objective lens, adjust the knob little by little, and observe the specimen. Cork slices, onion skins, fly wings. Wow! You can see so clearly. This is how a fly's wings are enlarged. I threw the giant transformation technique on him, but it couldn't be that big, and he tore apart. Sarala clicked her tongue in surprise and shouted. She was like a child who had just gotten a new toy, cheering for joy and clinging to Gretel more and more, refusing to leave. Gretel didn't even have time to eat. He took the food that Bernard sent and took a few bites. Suddenly, the silver dragon girl asked. What about the heart? How do you look at the heart? As he spoke, his eyes swept from left to right, and then from right to left, lingering on a few goats for a particularly long time. It seemed that if Greed promised, he would cut open a sheep on the spot, dig out the heart, cut it into slices, and put it under a microscope to look at it. Gretel Khan. No. We're going to ride these sheep down the mountain. If you want to see the cells, go back down the mountain and I'll find a way to show you. The silver dragon girl still stared at him with burning eyes. Greed hesitated for a moment. In this way, there are cells in the blood. Let me take some and show it to you. He found a silver needle and poked the sheep's ear to get a drop of blood. Slides, cover slips, on-site preparation of specimens, on-site adjustments. It's moving in here. It's moving, Sarala watched even more intently. My eyes were pressed against the eyepiece, almost drilling into it. Greed was so worried that she might get excited and break the microscope. Hey, do I have these in my blood too? Miss Yinlong suddenly turned back and grabbed him. Gretel chuckled, there should be. His eyes were wandering, turning left and right, not looking at Sarala. Theoretically, as long as it is a living thing, excluding incorporeal creatures, it should be composed of cells. Especially since the dragon's body can also conduct electricity, it should have an electrical biological reaction. But actually, who knows? And this is an elf transformed into a dragon. Does anyone know what the deformation process is like? Such a big body, so much material, compressed into a small elf body, what is the principle of change? What if the red giant collapses into a white dwarf? The more Gretel talks about him, the more curious the silver dragon girl becomes. After asking twice, I couldn't figure out the reason, so I simply stretched out my hand. Give me the needle. No, Gretel quickly put it into the space bag. The needle that just poked the sheep has not been sterilized yet. What are you going to do with it? Don't cross infection. Give it to me, forget it, I'll do it myself. She could also see clearly how Greed took blood and prepared specimens just now. He grabbed a set of glass pieces, put his fingertips into his mouth, bit it lightly, took it out and dripped the glass pieces on it. After fixing it, start adjusting the knob. Zi la. A puff of smoke rose. When Greed was busy rescuing the microscope, he saw a drop of blood falling from the stage and directly onto the light source below. Looking at the lens again, let alone blurry or not, a hole has been burned out. Girl, are you so powerful with just a drop of blood? No matter how powerful you are, don't destroy my microscope. From today to October 4th, monthly tickets are still doubled. From 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening, the crowdfunding reward is 1,500 points, and the author can receive 4 monthly tickets. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please give me a reward. Please give me the guaranteed monthly ticket, meow. Thanks to Adstavbich for the 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jiolan 2020. Chapter 387. Greed pursed her lips and looked at the silver dragon girl. Cyrilla tilted her head and looked at him. If there was a crow at the scene, it would definitely scream, fly over the two people's heads, and maybe even dive and drop a bomb. It's a pity that no one carries a crow familiar. The temperature, altitude, and vegetation here are not a place where crows can live. Therefore, the two people can only stare at each other, trying to make the embarrassment disappear over time, or as long as I am not embarrassed, then I am not the one who is embarrassed. Oops. It's broken. It's okay, I'll fix it. Cyrilla suddenly smiled sweetly. He grabbed the microscope, turned it over, and threw prosthetics onto the objective lens. Greed turned his head silently and cast his gaze into the distant darkness. It is said that dragon's blood is so corrosive that it can even melt metal. Therefore, when fighting dragons, you must take this into special consideration and use weapons made of special materials or enchant them. Most people who are exposed to dragon blood will scream in pain. Only the strongest warriors can resist this erosion and benefit from it. On the nature and uses of dragon's blood, Zamora Stuyvesant, Magical Calendar 185. Thunderhorn Vaults. Fine. Senior Master, have you really slain a dragon, or have you obtained dragon blood through some other means? I haven't seen the ability of dragon blood to corrode metal, but I saw its ability to corrode glass today. And, after the dragon transforms into an elf, does the blood still retain the properties of dragon blood? Should it be maintained in full or in part? If the properties of dragon blood remain unchanged, what about other cells? What about organs? If you have the chance, maybe you can do a study on cell state changes under transfiguration? Of course, it is definitely not made of living people, animals can also transform. Gretel was thinking wildly. White light flashed around her. Cyrilla wiped away the blood stains and threw repair techniques one by one on the lens, the stage, and the light source. The stage is as clean as new, and although the silver rod holding the eternal flame is a little short, it still emits light evenly and stably. Restoration, a level 0 spell of the transformation system, is quite useful for repairing some minor damage to objects. Of course, the specific degree of repair depends on the skill of the operator. Hey, why can't you see clearly? Cyrilla took a look at the eyepiece, cast a repair spell, looked again, and cast a repair spell again. Slender white fingers brushed the objective lens, and he lifted it up to take a look. There's no blood, I wiped it clean. What's going on? Greed leaned over to take a look. The scene under the eyepiece was blurry and uneven in size, as if there were dozens of mirrors installed. Gretel sighed. Forget it, stop repairing it. He reached for the arm of the mirror. The silver dragon girl put the microscope in her arms and half turned her body to block it. I'll fix it and give it to you. Do you believe me when I say you can't cultivate it well? The basic version of the optical microscope seems to have a simple structure, but the requirements are not low. Slight changes in the curvature of the lens, or unevenness, or insufficient smoothness of the surface of the lens will cause blurred vision and inability to observe. When wiping the lens, you must use special lens cleaning paper. Anything slightly rough can damage the lens. From what I saw just now, it's probably because the dragon's blood corroded the lenses into pits. During the repair process, these small parts were not taken care of. Gretel tried his best to explain the truth clearly. Alas, I can't talk about physics, I can only talk about logic. It's so tiring. So, it's just too small to see, so it can't be repaired, the silver dragon girl tilted her face. Before Greet could nod, she formed a circle with her left thumb and index finger and pointed it at the objective lens. Big. Above the circle, a piece of light and shadow quietly rose, magnifying the knuckle-sized objective lens by more than 10 times. Cyrilla stared at the image of the objective lens, observed it carefully for a moment, nodded, and flicked her nails again. Recover. With a click, the glass lens shattered on the spot and turned into 5 or 6 pieces. Greet looked at Sirira, and Sirira looked at Greet, looking at each other. This, I will compensate you. I will definitely compensate you. After breaking a microscope, the silver dragon girl finally stopped. Prince Rosga took advantage of the situation to greet her. Are you hungry? Come and have dinner together. What do you usually eat? Fruit? Or nectar? We only have a little bit of honey here. Do you want to eat cured meat? Do you want to try the cheese? Okay, okay. I haven't eaten dwarf food yet. Sarala leaned forward lightly and sat beside the fire. Gretel silently sat opposite her, took out a porcelain bowl from the space bag, scooped himself a bowl of potato pickled broth, and watched her gracefully take a large grilled pork ribs. Greet remembers clearly that in his previous life, his colleagues went on a group trip and ate mutton at an internet celebrity restaurant. That damn store just served lamb chops, whole, not cut, and there was no waiter to serve them. The doctors at the table looked at each other. Finally, he asked the store for a meat cleaver. The thoracic surgeon held the handle of the knife and tried to cut downwards. While cutting, he complained, I should have brought a chainsaw if I had known. The 2 orthopedic surgeons held the 2 ends and tried to break them apart. Their hands were full of grease, and their forehands were burned red. It was difficult to separate all the mutton chops. Shopkeepers in the Northwest Desert are so rough in their work, but why do dwarves do this? Do you want her to chew it directly? Although it was not impossible to chew, the word gnaw came to mind, and Gretel seemed to see the silver dragon opening its big mouth, crunching, and chewing the armored weapons into pieces like biscuits. Then, he saw Sarala sitting still, pinching the tips of 2 ribs with her slender fingertips, and pointing them outwards. Oh no! Countless muscle fibers, ligaments, and fascia are connected to each other. The ribs, which usually need to be cut with a knife to be separated, were torn open by her as easily as paper, and half of them were handed back with a smile. A little further away from the fire, the dwarf warriors were whispering to each other. Is the elf ranger so strong? High-level warriors should be able to do it, but she doesn't seem to have any effort at all. By the way, high-level warriors, do you eat too much? Do we bring enough food? Gretel calmed down silently and scanned the food in the space bag. Don't be afraid. For this trip, he packed a month's worth of food in his space bag. It's still affordable to feed Yinlong a meal. If she wants another meal tomorrow, just let her hunt by herself. However, the silver dragon girl did not show an appetite beyond that of ordinary people. She politely shared a little bit of the dinner, more like tasting it, and then declined His Highness the Prince's further entertainment. I'm full. Thank you, it's delicious. She stood up from the fire. Prince Rosga quickly took advantage of the firelight to wink at Gretel. Gretel looked at him blankly. Ahem, Prince Rosga blinked again, kicked Gretel, and pointed to the tent. Where should she live? Is it okay to live with you? The wind on the mountain is strong and cold. Why don't we all live in tents and let the elf ranger who has come from afar, let alone a beautiful woman, freeze alone outside? Gretel. Can dragons catch a cold? The camping site on the ridge was not big to begin with, and the traveling tents brought out by the dwarves were even shorter and smaller. Sirala walked around the camp, stopped in front of the largest tent, looked at it carefully, and wrinkled her nose. She then waved her hand, and a stone house appeared out of thin air, firmly rooted on the mountain road. Mr. Master, can you come over here? I still have a few questions to ask. Can we discuss it tomorrow? Regardless, Gretel finally won the right to sleep in his own tent. As for Miss Silver Dragon, whether she would spend the night in the elf form in the stone house or fly far away and transform into her original form, Gretel didn't want to know at all. Speaking of which, the size of the stone house could barely accommodate her dragon form, provided that no more people were squeezed in. Early the next morning, Sarah still walked with them. Moreover, he was far behind in the queue and kept asking. "Mr. Wizard. Can I call you Greet? Gretel, why did you pry off 2 of my scales? What does it mean to conduct electricity? Why can't it flow through the body if it is conductive?" After answering one question, she was able to ask 10 more questions, which made Greet's head and 2 heads grow bigger. The goat's legs underneath him were trembling, but he just didn't dare to run away. Gretel had no choice but to take out an iron ingot from his space bag. "So, can you use the shaping method to make it into many thin iron rods, and then put them together into a cage? Then, let's find an animal and try it. Let's talk about it, let's do an experiment. Faraday cage goes." Cyrilla took the iron ingot with her slender bare hands, glanced at the phantom outlined by Greet, and threw it up. She closed her eyes slightly, and the silver blue gem on her forehead shone brightly, covering the iron ingot. In the light, the piece of pig iron was flattened, stretched, and coiled. Thump! The light faded away, and half of the iron ingot fell to the ground with a crooked piece, like a half-welded wire cage. Sarah had a pretty face and walked quickly forward. Gretel quickly urged the goat to follow, but the goat whined, its legs became weak, and it knelt down. "Hey! What are you doing?" Gretel had no choice but to jump off the sheep's back and rush forward. Sarah looked like she was just walking quickly, but her speed was astonishing. Greet followed behind and ran all the way to the front of the team. With great difficulty, she finally stopped and stared at the mountain road ahead. "What's wrong?" Greet asked quietly. Turning his head, he saw that the pretty face of the silver dragon girl was cold, her right hand was pressed on the handle of the knife, and her anger level was clearly about to burn. Prince Rosga and others also came forward. Before they had time to ask, there was a clang, and Sarah's long sword was unsheathed and pointed straight ahead. "You guys! Get out of here!" On the opposite ridge, a small group of dwarves rode goats and meandered. At the end of the team was a human, wearing a black robe, who was clearly a priest of the Church of the Lord of Glory. From today to October 4th, monthly tickets are still doubled. From 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening, the crowdfunding reward is 1,500 points, and the author can receive 4 monthly tickets. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please give me a reward. Is there anyone who has voted for the guaranteed monthly ticket? Speed me up. Thanks to and Bendasha for the reward of 1,500 starting coins. Thanks to ONI who loves to play roller coasters for the 100 starting coins reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 388. Chapter 388 I, Saralahuahui, have never suffered this injustice. Red Comet Mars Wand rewards additional update 2. Thump. Thump. On the mountain road opposite, 6 dwarves and 1 human jumped off the goat one after another. If they are riding their own mounts, they can certainly sit still and charge at any time. However, now everyone's goats are temporarily tamed. In order to avoid trouble, it is better to get down as soon as possible. The steel shield, which was more than half the height of a man, more than half the height of a dwarf, hit the ground first. 2 dwarves holding war hammers, one on the left and one on the right, spread out behind the shield holder. Behind them, 2 dwarves took off their battle axes from their backs and held them in their hands. The axe blades fell diagonally to the ground. In the center of the formation, Kai, the candidate of the Black Rock tribe, was protected by the tribesmen. He looked over the steel shield and looked at the opposite side with a gloomy expression. The elf ranger in front was furious and drew his sword. The angry blade moved forward fiercely, and with just one finger pointing from afar, all the strands on his forehead stood upright. What was even more depressing was that Kai clearly felt that the female ranger's anger was not directed at him. The blade pointed at the spellcaster in the team, the priest of the glorious Holy See. Kai quickly turned around, and half of Mr. Pastor's body was exposed outside the cover. He could neither retreat nor squat. It's more embarrassing. Fortunately, before the silver-haired girl could draw her bow and nock an arrow, the little mage from the King's selection team caught up. He was running so hard that he finally reached the girl and asked something in a low voice. Behind them, Rothaga's gang urged their mounts to move forward, forward, forward. One step at a time, one step at a time. The speed was so slow that it looked like he was deliberately slowing down his work. Kai sneered in his heart and raised his voice. Rosga, are you going to attack us? I didn't. Prince Rosga simply jumped off the goat and dragged his mount forward. After taking 2 steps, seeing that the efficiency was too low, he stood on tiptoes and shouted. Miss Sarara, don't dash. It turns out that the elf ranger is named Sarala. Kai silently remembered the name. Almost at the same time, the silver-haired girl took a step forward and raised her voice again. Roll. A shout. On the Black Rock tribe's side, 7 goats moaned in unison. At the end of the queue, the priest of the glory Holy See screamed in pain, broke free from the reins of his horse, turned around and ran away. The black-robed priest fought hard to shoot a ray of holy light backwards, and after a moment, there was another one. However, the oppressive feeling on the silver-haired girl was too strong. The goat jumped up and ran down the hillside with an angle of at least 45 degrees. His movements were as light as walking on flat ground, and it was impossible for magic to catch up. There was a luggage bag hanging on the saddle, which disappeared altogether. Only the black-robed priest stayed where he was. His mount was gone, his package was gone, and it was estimated that the food, water bags, and tent blankets for the next few days were all gone. Greet looked at his dumbfounded look and felt that if it were him, he would have wanted to die. The dwarves of the Black Rock tribe took a collective step forward. The one who raised the shield, the one who raised the hammer, and the arm holding the battle axe used force to raise the battle axe diagonally. On the other side, the Fire Hammer tribe also put on a vigilant posture. Only Prince Rosga was still shouting desperately. Don't do it. This is a misunderstanding. We don't want to sabotage the king's selection. While shouting, he rushed over and stood in front of Sarala. Just as he stretched out his arm to pull her, the girl pushed him away and almost fell to the bottom of the ridge. He didn't dare to stretch out his hand again, so he could only shout desperately to Greet. Gretel, please help me. During the king's selection process, the candidate teams are not allowed to attack each other, let alone cause loss of life. If you are discovered, you will be kicked out of the tribe at the very least. In serious cases, you may even be expelled from the tribe and not allowed to return for life. The corners of Gretel's mouth twitched. The silver dragon girl was not from their team, and they couldn't control her. But obviously, no one would believe him if he said this, so he could only try to persuade him. Sarala, he lowered his voice. Calm down. Don't do anything. Sarala suddenly sniffed. Immediately afterwards, the long knife in her hand slowly descended, drew a slight arc, and aimed straight at Kai's eyebrows. The girl said word by word. Right, carve, roll. Those beautiful silver blue eyes gradually became lighter in color, almost turning into pure silver. Seeing the light jumping at the tip of the long knife, as if he was about to lose his breath, Gretel secretly wiped off cold sweat and grabbed her right hand. Let them pass. They are also a team participating in the king's selection. Fighting here violates the rules of the king's selection and will make us disqualified. It's none of your business. Sarala shook off his hand forcefully. It has nothing to do with you. Stay back and don't do anything. I'll beat 7 of them by myself. Come on. The other person responded with a sneer. Greet staggered to the side, rushed back, and grabbed the silver dragon girl again. By the way, he glared at the other party. What come? Do you know who she is? If she shows up as a silver dragon, the 7 of you, plus the 7 of us, won't be enough to fight her. Can you shut up? There's no point in telling them to get out, Gretel continued to advise. This mountain road is so narrow. There are no forks. Where to go? Go back. That's exactly in the same direction as us. We might as well let them pass. The two sides are back to back, and they will be out of sight soon. Then Cyrilla bit her lip in dissatisfaction. After thinking for a moment, he stamped his foot. Then I'll kill them. Don't. What grudge do you have against them? Greet sweated profusely. He struggled to drag Cyrilla back 2 steps and lowered his voice. Every wrong has its owner, and every debt has its owner. They are not the ones who beat you. If you are angry, don't take it out on them. But they all have a nasty smell. They are exactly the same. Cyrilla was angry. When she grew up to this age, her parents treated her like a treasure. She was a member of the same clan and relatives, and she was a little princess with a moonlight. This was the first time that I was ambushed by someone for no reason, and I almost lost my life. She managed to escape with great difficulty thanks to the magical protective weapon her father gave her. After flying for hundreds of miles, he fell down and fainted in front of humans. She, Cyrilla, can't bear this grievance. These people have the same smell as the attackers. It's not as strong, but it's exactly the same. She, who had just experienced danger, wanted to tear the other person into pieces as soon as she smelled it. Let's talk about it after the king's selection is over, Greet dragged her hard. Although based on his strength, it is actually a drop in the bucket, but at least it is an attitude. Don't do it here. Don't do it now. We have been busy choosing the king for almost a month. If you kill them now, all our efforts will be wasted. I told you that you don't need to do anything. Don't forget, you still owe me a microscope. I'll compensate you now. How many gold coins? If you don't obey me, I won't answer any questions you ask me in the future. The strength in the silver dragon girl's hand finally relaxed. She took 2 steps back and stood at the edge of the mountain path, her face as cold as frost, and she pointed at where she was going. Get out. Leave immediately. Don't appear in front of me. Prince Rosga breathed a sigh of relief and ran over immediately. He gave Gretel a thumbs up, turned his back to Cyrilla and spread his arms, blocking half of the road. He waved his left hand and tried his best to signal. Go quickly, go quickly. Such an elf ranger who knows magic, bows and arrows, and can cut rocks like mud with just a wave of his hand. If he really gets angry, I can't stop him. Here in the Black Rock tribe, a dwarf sneered and wanted to talk. Kai quickly pulled him to signal him to shut up. The group of people quickened their pace and passed in front of Cyrilla. Soon, their figures became smaller and smaller, turning into a series of wriggling black spots on the mountain road. The silver dragon girl looked back from time to time with a sullen face. Looking at her look, Greet was really afraid that she would return to her dragon form in the middle of the night and kill them all, or maybe she could kill them all without returning to her dragon form. To be honest, there is nothing wrong with doing it really cleanly. The problem is that there are many patrol teams from various tribes in the nearby mountains. Everyone knows when the king selecting team will set off and which team will meet which one. Besides, Greet still doesn't fully understand the prophecy spells in this world. He had no choice but to try his best to attract Cyrilla's attention. Hey, we are just halfway through the iron cage. Do you want to continue? Okay. You owe me once. Well. If they mess with me again later, don't stop me. Whatever you want after the king's selection. You have to answer 10 more questions from me. No, 20. Gretel sacrificed herself, the knowledge in her brain, and tried to appease the silver dragon girl, which was quite effective. At least that night, according to Bernard who was keeping watch, she didn't leave the stone house all night, probably because she didn't transform and go out to kill people. After another day of walking, we successfully descended the mountain. Entering the dwarf royal court, Cyrilla's eyes were immediately exhausted. She looked around and around, even wanting to reach out and touch the magma in the great furnace. Gretel quickly stopped. Don't. That thing can even heat iron red. Do you want to reveal the truth on the spot? If you want to transform into a dragon, let me know first so that I can run further away. Otherwise, when you expand in size, you might bounce me into the magma. The silver dragon girl smiled and retracted her hand, blinking her eyes, with a naughty look of "I'm not afraid, I just want to give you some face." Greet shook his head helplessly and led her around the melting pot and towards the mithril district. When he walked nearby, his footsteps suddenly stopped. What's wrong? I just wanted to tell you that there were people crying and cursing over there. The silver dragon girl said expressionlessly. Right in front. That direction has a smell that I hate. Greet became serious. He slowed down, turned the corner, and stood looking far away. There was a dense crowd in front of them, and Gretel, even with his height advantage, could only see a stretcher placed in front of the mansion's gate, with a circle of dwarves surrounding it, crying and shouting. Brother! Big brother! You died so miserably. Why should they treat it? Why? Gretel was shocked. What's the situation? Put someone to death? Carrying a corpse to block the door? Medical trouble? He squinted his eyes and took a closer look. The door of the mansion was closed and silent, except for a wooden holy symbol hanging low-key. The entire field of vision suddenly became clear. Beside her, Cyrilla raised her hand with a smile, her fingertips shining brightly. Sharp eyes. How about it? You can see clearly now. Gretel nodded hastily and thanked her. He looked carefully and saw that the deceased on the stretcher had a grey face, purple lips and a sticky and messy beard, as if there was a lot of dirt stuck on it. So what is the disease? Why do the dwarves bother them? He was far away, had no medical history, and no treatment records, so he couldn't tell. Let's go. Isn't it normal for their family to kill people? The silver dragon girl murmured to urge him. Gretel watched for a moment, but couldn't figure out the point. He shrugged and followed her. Just 2 steps away, a shout suddenly sounded in front of the door of the mansion behind him. Wash your lungs. Wash your at #UN% lungs. Wash you when others wash it, and you'll wash them all to death. Greet stopped instantly. From today to October 4th, monthly tickets are still doubled. From 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening, the crowdfunding reward is 1,500 points, and the author can receive 4 monthly tickets. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please give me a reward. Ask for a guaranteed monthly ticket. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 389. Beckett Blackrock was extremely sad and extremely angry. Although he had fallen out with his eldest brother a long time ago. Even on the day of the Hearth Festival, when the eldest brother walked into his house, he could only drink a glass of ale, which was almost a treat for strangers. As for the reason? Bah, who told him to betray God the Father? What is there to believe in that Lord of Glory? Can sunlight reach the mine? Can you help them mine? Even if they are prospecting in the wild, what they can rely on more is the teachings of God the Father. But he couldn't do anything except fall out. The eldest brother has a serious lung disease and is often short of breath. He knows that. As for Father God's priest, although he tried his best to treat her, the effect was just that. It works a little on the day of treatment, but within a month, or even less than 10 days, it's back to the same old state. And how many patients can a pastor of God the Father take care of? The moon does not come up once every 3 to 5 years. At this time, it is better to have a pagan healer involved than not at all. Becket Blackrock couldn't do anything except restrain his wife and children from going to his eldest brother's place, let alone listening to the pagan priest. "I'd rather die," snored. However, when his eldest brother was called to participate in the lung cleaning treatment and finally died, Becket's sadness and anger made him unable to remain indifferent. "He was the one who took care of my eldest brother in his last few hours. He was the one who watched his eldest brother die. I couldn't lie down, I couldn't breathe, I stretched out my hands to grab my chest, my face was blue, and there was blood in the foam coming out of the corner of my mouth. He has no choice. There is nothing he can do. If they hadn't been called to wash their lungs, if it hadn't been for the pagan priest who naturally asked them to dedicate themselves to the people and the Lord of Glory, the eldest brother would never have died. Another acquaintance died together, and he was called to go there. Of the 4 dwarves, 2 died. Despicable and shameless heathen. The lackeys of the alien gods. Don't even think about hiding in there and not saying anything. Give me back my eldest brother's life. My eldest brother is a good person, but you called him to wash his lungs and tortured him to death. It's over. Kill for life. Kill for life. What, washing the lungs? Can the lungs be washed too?" Greed tightened his palms, and the silver dragon girl came to his ear and whispered. "Turn the lungs out and wash them. This will definitely kill someone. Those guys are so annoying. Actually." Gretel took a deep breath and pulled her back 2 steps. Avoiding the crowd, he got into a quiet corner and whispered. "Lung cleansing and other things, here, I started doing it first." "What? You?" Sarah looked up and down, looking at him as if she didn't recognize him, and as if she had discovered some strange treasure. After a moment, he made fists with both hands and said angrily. "So they stole your technology? They're a bunch of bastards. Just wait, I'll take off their turtle shells." Hey, don't," Gretel quickly grabbed her. As soon as he started taking action, he was dragged forward and staggered 2 steps. Fortunately, Sarah stopped in time to prevent him from being thrown out of the corner. "Don't go. I guess they didn't steal it. Are you still speaking for them?" The silver dragon girl stopped and turned back, staring at Gretel with her silver blue eyes, her pupils becoming lighter and lighter. "With those guys, how can there be any good people among them? In fact, there are really good people. In terms of probability, there must be good people in a large organization, people who sincerely believe in gods and practice teachings. In terms of practicality, Pastor Martin also left a good impression on Gretel. But under the anger of the silver dragon girl, Greed never wanted to argue face to face. He could only smile and say, "I'm not speaking for them, but they can't steal it. Those people don't even know what's in the lungs. How can it be so easy to put a tube in it? So they did it on their own." Sarah rolled her eyes, accepted the answer, and glared outside. "No wonder it kills people. Bah. In fact, correct, or in other words, lung washing performed strictly according to the regulations under the supervision of modern medical methods and monitoring equipment, will inevitably lead to death." Gretel smiled. "Cyrilla has already grabbed him. So the lungs can really be washed? How? How many have you washed? Hey, can you let me take a look next time you wash your lungs? If you abide by the rules and your family agrees." Gretel sighed. The noise outside became louder and louder. There was a sudden roar, and the door of the mansion opened. 4 glorious knights faced each other and stood in front of the steps with their swords drawn. Then, 2 dwarves walked out of the mansion, one on the left and one on the right, standing side by side. Beckett, stop scolding. Beckett and we all accept treatment voluntarily. Lung washing is inherently dangerous. We are all ready to sacrifice for our people. Even if we die, the Lord of Glory will accept our souls. Bah! You don't want him to be able to return to Father God. Beckett punched him. The two dwarves fought back angrily. Some people on the scene helped beat them up, and some started a fight. The Radiant Knight wanted to separate the two sides but could not use too much force. Some people took advantage of the chaos and hammered their armor until it made a bang-bang sound. It was like cold water pouring into a pan of oil. In an instant, there was chaos at the door of the mansion. The more Sarala listened, the angrier she became. She geared up and pulled Gretel. You stand here and wait for a while. I'm going to beat them. Forget it, don't go. Gretel's eyes were heavy as he pulled her into the alley, far away from the center of the hustle and bustle. Sarala was very unconvinced. What are you doing? They are using your methods to do whatever they want, and you are helping them. I'm not helping them. Greet emphasized the word them very hard. I am. He sighed softly. After a person was executed, his family members carried the body, and gathered a group of people outside to curse. This scene was so familiar. In his more than 10 years of life as a doctor in his previous life, he had experienced it, and it was almost like a nightmare. Maybe the glorious cult really doesn't value the dwarf's life, maybe they want to compete with him, but someone is willing to come out and testify for them, saying that they voluntarily participated in the experiment. The voluntary use of faith to deceive is also voluntary. At least, in the absence of evidence, he could not make a presumption of guilt, saying that the Guanghuan cult deliberately killed people. He had no choice but to let the people around him attack just because someone died. He looked gloomy and sighed silently. Sarala said oh, but she actually didn't yell about going to fight or smashing up the house. She patted the back of his hand and followed him without saying a word. The two of them went around and back to the entrance of the trade group station. Gretel was just thinking about how to avoid Sarala and quietly inform the Archmage of her identity when he saw several dwarves walking over quickly. Gretel? Are you back? Just in time. I was looking for you. Wang Ting attaches great importance to the preaching of the Lord of Glory's religion among the dwarves, but it is difficult to raise an issue. After all, the Wang Ting cannot send troops to various tribes. However, they killed the dwarf in the royal court and some people started making trouble, that is another matter. Archmage Serrano, Mage Zimond, and Gretel were invited to the royal court together. Sarala also followed as a matter of course. Seeing that she was an elf ranger, several magicians didn't know what to say and just looked at Gretel again and again. Gretel could only smile. Arriving in front of the group of elders, I had previously negotiated with them about lung washing. The elder who presided over the contract had a serious look on his face and asked Greet directly. Mr. Nordmark, someone took the lives of our compatriots in the name of treating them. We want to know whether they intended to kill, or whether they were negligent in the treatment process, or deliberately ignored the danger. Lung lavage is a treatment you first created the means, can you give us some pointers? Gretel was silent for a moment. So, this is the rhythm of medical evaluation? He looked around and saw a corpse not far away. The dwarf who had made a noise outside the mansion cried so hard that his beard was covered with snot, and he lay on the corpse, sobbing. Very good, at least there is a body and he is not allowed to make false accusations. A little further on, two glorious knights stood on either side, closely protecting a white-robed priest and glaring at him. Gretel sighed. If I were allowed to dissect the body, I could roughly find out the cause of death medically. But dash. What? An autopsy? You want to cut open my brother's body? No. Beckett. A series of arguments and scoldings. Gretel sighed helplessly. I just know it is like this, I just know it is like this, Most of the family members are not allowed to dissect the body, and they are unwilling to do it, and they have to seek medical evaluation, which becomes an unsolvable problem. And many family members who cannot get answers will resort to extra-legal means. He rubbed his forehead with a headache. Beside him, Cyrilla blinked at him, pressed her fingers on the corners of her mouth, and pulled out an exaggerated smile. Gretel gave her a forced smile. In order to prevent the dispute from turning into a fight, he raised his hand to signal for silence and continued. As for issues other than medicine, I am only a low-level magician and don't know much about magic and divine arts. I may not be able to accurately judge the method by which the deceased died. The Radiant Knight's expression softened slightly. Gretel continued. As for whether they were intentional or negligent, maybe you have to ask the caster himself. Or, ask the gods. Snort. Snort. The dwarf holding the corpse and crying, and the shining knight on the other side. At the same time, he snorted coldly. One may find him evasive, the other, perhaps offended by the word gods. After all, in the view of the Holy Sea of Glory, the Lord of Glory is the only God. Gretel didn't look at anyone, turned around and bowed to the group of elders sitting there. My abilities only go so far. I'm so sorry. There was silence. Archmage Serrano frowned slightly, the dwarf elders looked grave, and the Radiant Knight glared angrily. Gretel slowly stepped aside and sat down on the chair at the bottom of the mage's seat without saying a word. Suddenly, the dwarf holding the body slowly raised his head and wiped away his tears. So, if I ask you to wash your lungs and you survive again, can it prove that they are harming my brother? From today to October 4th, monthly tickets are still doubled. From 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening, the crowdfunding reward is 1,500 points, and the author can receive 4 monthly tickets. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please give me a reward. Ask for a guaranteed monthly pass. Thanks to @Bendasha for the 1,500 starting coins. Thanks to @Kexan Food Machinery Zhongtao for the 100 book coins reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jialan 2020. Chapter 390. There was a silent commotion in the conference hall. Several dwarf elders stroked their beards. From their standpoint, if Gretel is willing to prove it, that is the best. If he is not willing, then they can't say anything. After all, the affairs of the dwarves belong to the dwarves themselves and should not be left to their friends or brothers. Archmage Serrano and Mage Hammond exchanged glances. As mages, they could naturally imagine how many flaws there were in this proof. However, they were concerned about the relationship between the council and the dwarves, so they could not stop it on the spot. Whether you agree or not depends on Gretel. And the other side. Opposite the mages, Bishop Clint, who was protected by 2 glorious knights, tried his best to hide the hatred in his eyes. Damn it, it's this little mage again. Treat savages, treat little boys, treat dwarves, treat them wherever you go. There are new tricks every day. If it hadn't been for him, Lord Genoni wouldn't have been able to force himself to study the magical lung cleansing technique. If he accuses himself of murder. Clint quietly reached into his pocket with his right hand. Next to Gretel, the silver-haired elf ranger twitched his nose and silently took half a step. Gretel didn't pay attention to the undercurrent in the hall. In fact, he did not look at any of those people, but looked deeply and quietly at the dwarf who made the request. Look at his undried tears, look at his wet beard, look at the corpse at his feet. I watched the red in his eyes gradually fade and disappear, from being arrogant to shrinking, from raising his head to lowering his head, before slowly and firmly shaking his head. Sorry. I will not treat you for this reason. You. Treatment is treatment, Gretel said seriously. He touched the space bag and held the oak staff in his hand. The tail of the stick landed on the ground, and the 4 green leaves on the head of the stick swayed automatically in the absence of wind. Treatment is to help those who need it. It is not a force used to attack. It cannot and should not be used to prove that other people's treatment is out of malicious intent. Even medical evaluations are not done this way. It does not mean that if one doctor's treatment fails and another doctor succeeds in performing the same treatment on other patients, it can prove that the former is maliciously harming others. Medical malpractice requires a more careful and professional certification process. As for intentional homicide, that belongs to the criminal category and has nothing to do with medicine. His expression was soft and his tone was firm. Combined with the oak staff he is holding in his hand, he actually looks like a pastor with deep compassion. Beckett looked at him blankly for a while, then lowered his head. I know. The 2 magicians exchanged glances and nodded to each other. The dwarf elder lowered his eyes slightly, helpless. Sarah, on the other hand, looked at Gretel's rare serious look and then looked at the oak staff in his hand, and laughed out loud with a poof sound. The dwarf elder coughed. The elf ranger was a distant visitor, and she was a young lady. It was hard for him to accuse her of ruining the atmosphere, so he could only pretend that he didn't hear or see her laughing. He stared at Bishopclind and trimmed his beard majestically. In this case, let's assume that you are well-intentioned. However, it is a fact that good people were put to death by your priests. We respect the Lord of Glory, but from now on, please do not spread your word outside your residence. The gods are gone. The last sentence was extremely serious. Bishopclind had a serious face and did not nod in approval, nor did he refute. Gretel didn't need to be involved in what happened next. When he saw the elders talking about compensation with Bishopclind, he just found a reason, said goodbye and slipped out. Oh! You looked so funny just now, Sarah couldn't help laughing as soon as she went out. Seeing Gretel looking at her helplessly, she smiled even more happily. I wanted to see you beat up those bastards. You actually let them go. By the way, do you think they killed people on purpose, or by accident? It must have been accidental, Gretel sighed. Actually, it's useless even if you are very careful. Lung washing is very difficult to do. If the patient's condition is slightly worse, he will die easily. These people are not taught by me. I guess they don't know what to do and what to do. The situation cannot be done. Then they made their own decision. Humph. They deserve it. So did those dwarves. Why didn't they ask you to do it? Hey, when will you do it next time? Remember to call me to see it. It's coming soon. Before I set off to go up the mountain, there were more than 20 people waiting in line. Gretel, who promised the silver dragon girl soon, encountered unexpected trouble. He went to see Vigeland to check back on his postoperative condition. As soon as he arrived at the door, he heard the loud voices of the dwarves arguing. Why don't you dare? Look at me, isn't it great? But, it's really dangerous. Look, 2 people are dead over there. What if I die too? They don't understand at all. The method of washing the lungs was invented by Greed. He knows how to do it. How does the other side know? Without asking a question, you just use magic to pour water. You will definitely die. To be honest, it seems safer to use magic to fill the water. The tube is pushed in and the tube is pulled out. It feels even scarier. Coward. Forget it, I'll find someone else. Vigeland was furious, turned around and ran out, bumping into Gretel. Seeing that Greed was unable to advance or retreat, he scratched his grey beard. For a moment, he was even more embarrassed than Greed. That guy, You have such a loud voice. Greed quickly changed the subject and said. You seem to be very energetic. Are you recovering? You haven't been feeling unwell these past few days, right? No, Vigeland suddenly became active, raised his hand and slapped his chest. Much better. Thanks to you for helping with the treatment. Come, let's find a place and talk slowly. According to Vigeland's character, or according to the character of any dwarf, if he encounters such a good thing, he will decisively find a tavern. You can't express your joy and gratitude without getting drunk and then inviting the whole pub to have a few drinks. Gretel was dragging him around, or in other words, he showed the intention of dragging him around. The silver dragon girl smiled and held his hand before dragging him back to his home to sit down. Gretel took out his stethoscope and listened to every part of his chest, back, heart sounds, and lung sounds, and then asked him to measure his vital capacity. The recovery is pretty good. It has increased by more than 15% compared to before the operation, and it has also increased to a certain extent compared to the last measurement. Gretel gave his evaluation with a smile while writing the record as quickly as possible. As I write and write, there is a purr, a purr, a purr. Sarala. Why are you bragging about this? It's fun. Let's see how much I can blow. With your transformation technique, how do you change the organs in your body? Looking at such a slender person, you can blow out a 20-liter can that is big enough for a barbarian. In any case, Vigeland's forced expiratory volume in 1 second, vital capacity, and maximum ventilation, the three major indices of lung function, have all improved greatly. In other words, on the basis of receiving the blessing of treatment techniques and rapid recovery after surgery, there can be further improvements. Vigeland pulled another subject over and tested it again, and the results were almost the same. The two dwarves became more interested in chatting, and even put on armor, picked up war hammers, and had a live battle. Very good, I know that your recovery is very good and you can already do strenuous exercise. No one is willing to do it now, Vigeland sighed. A bunch of cowards. I told Gretel that it would be okay for him to take action, but they still retreated. How can we promote lung washing technology like this? Obviously there are so many people who hope to receive treatment. Not to mention complete cure, at least they can get better. Gretel was silent. The promotion of the same technology depends on doctors and the cooperation of patients. If there really are no dwarves willing to accept treatment. As far as medical ethics is concerned, everyone has the right to dispose of their own body, and doctors must obtain the patient's informed consent for any treatment. If they don't want to be cured, then they won't be cured. Besides, whether to treat or not to treat, patients and their families often have many factors other than medical treatment to consider. There are some things that one knows whether they are good or bad, and it is not something that a doctor can comment on. After years of working in the emergency department, Gretel has seen too many things in his past life. The only option is to die, he said calmly. Seeing Vigeland looking at him with wide eyes in surprise, Gretel shrugged, spread his hands and smiled. Otherwise, what should I do? We can't just tie them up and treat them. Then what will happen to me? One step forward is Dr. Zombie in Plants vs. Zombies. 2 steps forward is a certain notorious numerical unit. The boundaries of medical ethics protect both patients and doctors, and they must not be crossed. But what should we do? Vigeland asked anxiously. Seeing Gretel smiling and saying nothing, he stamped his foot. Don't be angry with them, I'll find someone right now. Don't worry, we can always find hundreds of people who are willing to receive treatment. Before you leave, I must learn this technique. I'm afraid it's not that easy. Good things don't go out, and bad things spread thousands of miles. If they want to offset the impact of killing people, Vigeland and the others may have to put in hundreds of times the effort. Gretel did have other plans, but he didn't want to say it. He just smiled. Well, come on. No need to look for it. With a creak, the door opened wide. A heavy step stepped in. Look, can you do it on me? Prince Rosga. Greet almost sighed. In fact, this candidate couldn't be better, young, with mild symptoms, strong recovery ability, and meets all the patient's conditions. He has a high status and great influence. If he can win the battle to choose the king, he will undoubtedly be a living advertisement for lung cleaning treatment. Moreover, improving lung function is also an effective way to improve his combat effectiveness and ensure victory in the king-selecting battle. There are still 7 days until the full moon. Look at Vigeland. He has recovered very well in 7 days. Prince Rothergar smiled confidently at Gretel. If you agree, I will immediately go to my father and sign another contract with the council. Don't worry, even if there is an error in the treatment, or I lose the battle to choose the king, I will never blame you. Cyrilla blinked, looking at this and that. He wanted to reach out and pull Gretel, but knowing that the matter was serious, he raised his hand several times and put it down again. Gretel sighed and smiled. Can I still refuse to agree? From today to October 4th, monthly tickets are still doubled. From 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening, the crowdfunding reward is 1,500 points, and the author can receive 4 monthly tickets. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please give me a reward. Ask for a guaranteed monthly pass.